After America is made on the lands of the Bunurong and Wurundjeri Woiwurrung peoples of the Kulin Nations, we pay our respects to elders past and present and acknowledge that sovereignty was never ceded.
We are in a battle for the soul of America.
This is a fraud on the American public.
Hi, I'm Angus Blackman, and this is After America. I'm joined by Dr. Emma Shortis, Australia Institute Director of International and Security Affairs. G'day, Emma.
Hi, Angus.
It's a public holiday in the ACT today, but not for us hardworking folks in the People's Republic of Victoria.
That's right. We only want public holidays for football anyway. It's how it should be.
Yes. Let's get straight into it. Trump is in a real big loop on Iran.
Iran is very much intent. They want very much to make a deal. So far, they haven't gotten there. We're not satisfied with it, but we will be. The strait's going to be open to everybody.
And who would control it?
International waters. Nobody's going to control it. We're going to watch over it. We'll watch over it, but nobody's going to control it. That's part of the negotiation that we have. They would like to control it. Nobody's going to control it. It's international waters, and Oman will behave just like everybody else, so we'll have to blow them up.
He made more noise about a peace deal. They haven't got anywhere. Some stuff about nuclear dust, which I'll ask you about in a sec. Nothing on Lebanon. And then Trump threatened to blow up Oman. Mm-hmm. What a joke.
Yeah, it's a total clown show. I think, we say often on this show, Angus, it is as ridiculous and stupid as it seems. There's no need to go looking for complicated strategy. It just is what it says on the box. And Trump is in this loop where he will make noise about a peace deal being imminent. There'll be one in the next couple of days, the next 3 days, sometimes the next 2 weeks. Headlines will dutifully reflect that, and say things like the United States and Iran inch closer to peace deal. Yeah. And then it turns out no progress has been made on any of the critical issues, and it was all Trump bluster. Or he's floated a potential peace deal that is significantly worse than the JCPOA, the Obama administration era deal. He gets hammered by right-wing hawkish Republicans like Lindsey Graham or Ted Cruz, and then he backtracks. And we're in the same place, really, that we've been for months now, with no sign of really breaking out of that cycle. And if we do, I think it will just be because Trump is willing, is finally, I guess, gotten tired of it or backed down enough that he's willing to concede on those critical issues like enrichment, like the Strait of Hormuz, and just wants it to be done. And I think the Iranian regime knows that. They know they can wait him out.
Yeah. And Emma, he keeps truthing about nuclear dust. Mm-hmm. Can you explain that, please?
I mean, in as far as you can explain anything that Trump says, he does talk about nuclear dust a lot. And as far as anybody can tell, he's talking about Iran's stockpile of enriched uranium, which as far as I know, I mean, obviously I'm not an expert on enriched uranium either. Sure. As far as I can tell, is not actually dust, but I've heard some analysis that suggests Trump is calling this because he made that argument that it was all obliterated. So he's turned it into dust and now it has to be collected. But
good Lord.
Honestly, who knows? But he does describe the stockpile of enriched uranium as nuclear dust. And this is one of the sticking points around a peace deal is what happens to that? Does it get destroyed in Iran? And Trump has mused about this. Does it get destroyed under supervision in Iran? Does it get taken out of Iran and destroyed in some neutral third place? Does it come back to the United States? And Trump talks about this because just leaving it obviously would be a major concession and really would be, again, a backward step from that Obama deal. So, and Trump kind of, as he does, he's said this out loud, that it's a PR issue for him, what happens to the nuclear dust. And again, he...
That's definitely the most important thing when it comes to enriched uranium, the PR issue facing Donald Trump.
Yeah, I mean, that is always the reference point, isn't it? His own PR and how it affects, how he looks. It's not the actual fate of the nuclear dust that preoccupies him. It's how he can spin it.
Yeah. One of his latest attempts to shift the goalposts is around the Abraham Accords. He was saying, and we're recording on Monday. I think this was last week. God knows what's going to happen now. That a deal with Iran is contingent on Arab nations signing up to the accords. He's posted that he's mandatorily requesting that they sign it. Can you just explain for people who aren't, across the details of this, what the Abraham Accords are and like what he is saying here?
Okay, so the Abraham Accords were struck during Trump's first administration, and this was an agreement between basically Israel, the United States, I think Bahrain signed up, the UAE also signed up, and the idea was for Arab nations to normalize relations with Israel. As with all of Trump's, signature achievements, it never really meant much at the time, and the rest of the Arab nations didn't sign up, and of course, after Trump's first administration and this enormous diplomatic achievement, as Republicans like to describe it, since then, as many experts have said, the Israeli Defense Forces have committed genocide in Gaza. We had Navi Pillay, the UN commissioner, on the show a while back now, and the evidence is clear. So, against any kind of diplomatic benchmark, the Abraham Accords have not been successful, but Trump likes to describe them, I think on He Truth, that it was if all Arab nations signed up to the Abraham Accords, including Iran, it would be the best, most important agreement in the Middle East in 5,000 years and ever into the future. Yes, I know.
It's quite a statement.
Yes, it really is. So he is now, as he said, he's shifting the goalposts. And I think what happened is that Trump floated the idea of this peace deal. He got absolutely hammered by the right of the Republican Party, and so he threw in the Abraham Accords, both because Republicans love this deal, they love the Abraham Accords, and as a way of kind of backing out of that peace deal that he was getting hammered about. He throws in another requirement that the Iranians aren't going to meet, so that that we go back to the start. And so, he did this long, even for him, it was a long screed on Truth Social, mandatorily requesting that all Arab nations, including Iran, sign up. I don't even know what that means.
No, that doesn't mean anything.
I do some mandatorily requesting at home with my children. It doesn't work.
Yeah. So this all comes in the context of what Israel is doing in the region. Israel is continuing to push into Lebanon, and despite a quote-unquote ceasefire there. And there were reports out last week about Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu ordering the Israeli Defense Forces to take 70% of Gaza, the current number being estimated to be about 64%. That seems to me like we're moving further away from a genuine peace, not closer to it.
Yeah, I've been thinking a lot, Angus, over the weekend about the meaning of words and the way that Trump just sucks all meaning out of words. Like we were just having a laugh about mandatorily requesting and whatever the fuck that means. It doesn't mean anything.
Yeah.
And the same is now true, I think, of the word ceasefire. Like, what does that mean in the context of what is happening currently in the Middle East, in Palestine, where since that ceasefire was brokered by the United States in Gaza, Israeli Defense Forces have killed, I was reading this morning, 900 Palestinians and are in total breach of the ceasefire when the Israeli leader is saying that, Israel is now aiming to control 70% of Gaza, which, was never anywhere in any ceasefire agreement.
Yeah.
What does it mean that Israel is still attacking Lebanon? What does it mean that the United States is effectively engaged in a naval blockade of the Strait of Hormuz and is torpedoing ships attempting to break that blockade, which they've done over the weekend again? Like, how is that? How can we possibly describe any of that as a ceasefire? It might be a slight reduction in violence, but it's not a ceasefire. These words become completely meaningless. And I think, in the process, and I think this is also deliberate, especially on the part of people like Netanyahu, to just undermine whatever faith is left in the rules-based order and the need for nations to stick to what they said. I think none of these people are acting in good faith, and everybody knows it.
Yeah. And I mean, you talk about a reduction in violence, but I mean, a reduction on the horrific numbers of killings that were taking place before the agreement.
Yeah, exactly.
Like
900 people killed during a ceasefire. That's not a ceasefire.
No. So on Gaza, the Democrats released their review of the 2024 presidential election after initially there was a bid to block its release.
Mm-hmm.
Friend of the show, Matt Duss, wrote a great piece in The Nation about this. The review just didn't mention Gaza. Just didn't mention it. Like what are they doing?
I mean, I wish I could answer that question, Angus. You're certainly not the only one asking it. It is wild, I think, the way the Democratic Party continues to avoid having this reckoning over Gaza and the Democrats' role in what has happened there, and particularly the role of President Biden and his refusal to engage with Democratic voters who were devastated and angry about what was happening and US complicity. And we go back again and again to Michigan and to the primaries in Michigan, where 100,000 Democratic voters, voted for no one over Biden in protest for his what they perceived as his support, rightly, I think, for the Israeli government. And they just ignored it. That was such an early warning signal for Biden and for the Democrats. That was ignored, that was deliberately ignored. And to continue to refuse to engage with that, to engage with the total disconnect between what Biden was saying about his values and his compassion and what he was doing in practice. Democrats are still suffering as a result of that. I think sort of left-leaning progressive-ish parties across democracies are struggling with that gap between their rhetoric about the state of the world and what they are attempting to do about it, which appears to be often, and in the case of the Democrats, and particularly Democrats under Biden, worse than nothing.
Yeah.
And in doing so, just ceding all of this ground to forces like Trumpism, and I think that's what Matt was arguing in that great piece. And I think that's what lots of progressive Democrats are arguing. But there is this tension at the heart of the Democratic Party where there are rusted-on supporters for Israel. There are Zionists in the party who are engaged in this broader, fight for the soul of the Democratic Party. And for many of them, that involves ignoring or burying lots of hugely pressing questions.
For too long with Aukus, we talked too much and delivered too little. That has now changed.
We're accelerating delivery of advanced capabilities to our warfighters, and together, today, we're pleased to announce the first Aukus Pillar 2 signature project,
which will see all three countries invest in the development of cutting-edge payloads and enabling systems for uncrewed undersea vehicles. This is the three countries putting real money behind a capability that we will put into the hands of the warfighter next year.
Aukus is the most significant military partnership since NATO.
I want to move on to AUKUS because you talked with Guardian Australia journalist Ben Doherty about the AUKUS submarine deal last week, and there have been some significant-ish updates to the deal. So instead of some new submarines or our new submarine that we were definitely going to get, it's going to be all old submarines that we're definitely going to get. Thoughts?
Yes. As this was being announced, there was some great commentary on social media about getting some op-shop submarines or, buying your secondhand car as opposed to a brand new one and what that might mean about ongoing maintenance costs or hidden issues. But yes, this has been a long time coming. As you said, we spoke to Ben on the show last week, and the US submarine building industry is in pretty dire straits. Like, it's too slow to meet its own requirements, let alone to meet, the requirements or the stated requirements, I guess, of the Aukus optimal pathway, which was to sell Australia a couple of secondhand Virginia-class submarines and I think one new one. So over the weekend, that has changed. The Aukus partners have announced that, as you said, it will now be 3 secondhand Virginia-class submarines, which is, it's a response to reality, that those production realities that we spoke about with Ben, but also I think the political pressure. There was just, in the Australian press at least, article after article about how do we reconcile these two things? As Ben was saying, you can't reconcile the political rhetoric about full steam ahead and the actual material reality of production rates. So this is a response to that. The Defence Minister, Richard Marles, framed it as the more cost-effective, quicker option. But we haven't seen anything about how much money we're going to save, interestingly.
Yeah, I thought the reporting was odd because the Defence Minister talked about significant cost savings, but also that there's no major change to the overall cost. I mean, I assume that's partly because the majority of the cost is made up by the UK phase of the agreement that because they've got to design and develop a whole new nuclear submarine. Likelihood of that happening aside, like that would be the more expensive part, I assume.
Yes, I think you can assume that, but I think we also need to recognise that with these kinds of defence projects, it's all made up anyway. Like, as our colleague Alan Beam likes to say, you take those defence estimates for big projects like this, and you've got to at least triple it, and then you'll get close to the real number that they're going to spend. That's how defence budgets work. As someone described it to me, defence is pretty good at losing a bunch of money down the back of the couch fairly regularly. So I don't think we should put a huge amount of stock in those numbers and also put it alongside the fact that at the same time that this announcement was made about those secondhand Virginia-class submarines, the 3 parties to the deal have also announced another project under Pillar 2 of AUKUS, which is more around general defence cooperation, around the development of unmanned, how do they describe them? Unmanned autonomous submarines, drones, effectively, underwater drones this is framed as an effort to protect undersea infrastructure, particularly cables. And interestingly, the UK has committed, I think, £150 million to this project, but we haven't heard anything about what Australia is committing in terms of numbers. So no doubt that will well make up for those savings around secondhand submarines.
Yeah. We talked about production rates with Ben last week, and you mentioned them just then. But Richard Marles said he has a sense of confidence about production rates in the United States, which really has echoes of Donald Trump's concepts of a plan. And my sense of confidence about going to the gym twice this week. Like, the language around these things is always really interesting, and people are speaking live and whatever, but it doesn't project a huge amount of confidence. But I know you noticed a few interesting quirks, I suppose, with the language that was used during this announcement.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I think it is worth saying that so this conference in Singapore is the Shangri-La Dialogue, which is kind of like Security Boy Christmas.
I had Rugby League Christmas last week, and this is...
You did. Yeah, that's what I thought. So at Security Boy Christmas, there is a lot of Security Boy language, like, much talk about the geostrategic environment, etc. And so it's entirely on brand, I suppose, that, Richard Marles and his colleagues would be using this kind of language. And it kind of goes back to our earlier conversation about what do words even mean? Like, what does a sense of confidence about production rates even mean? But this has surrounded AUKUS from the start, this idea, this insistence that we're all committed to it and we're all investing in it. So it's going to happen. Those construction rates will eventually catch up, even though all the evidence we have suggests that it just won't, that it's not shifting and it's not necessarily even an issue of money. It's an issue of skills and material reality. But, nobody, unsurprisingly, I guess, nobody in power and nobody's invested in these projects is really willing to say that.
Yeah.
But I mean, the language really did stand out to me. I missed sense of confidence, perhaps because I was so struck by some of the other things Richard Marles said in that press conference that he held with his colleagues from the United States and the UK. There were two things in particular that stood out to me that Marles said. The first thing he said was when he talked about his good friend, Pete Hegseth, which, you know, is an interesting thing to say about a man like that. We've spoken about Hegseth a lot on the show, and, you know, the way he has talked about the rules of war and the rules of armed conflict as if they're meaningless, you know.
Woke impediments to their lethality or some crap like
Yeah.
that.
Yep. You know, this is a Secretary of Defense. And I mean, it's even notable that Miles calls him the Secretary of War, which is not like his legal title. His title is Secretary of Defense. So that really stood out to me, as did Miles's use of the word warfighter, which is a real Hegseth obsession. You know, Hegseth talks all the time about equipping our warfighters. And I don't follow it that
watching
closely.
every press conference, yeah.
No, exactly. But I've not heard Miles use that before. And it did really stick out to me as a clear indication of where Australia's alignment is. And again, you know, I get to go back to what we were talking about earlier, the disconnect between Miles talking about his good friend Pete Hegseth and equipping warfighters, and with his speech where he talked about the international rules-based order and how it's in everyone's interest, including small nations, for the international rules-based order to be strengthened. Like, you can't reconcile those two things. Pete Hegseth is one of the principal architects of the destruction of that rules-based order, a gleeful architect of that destruction. Yeah. And so again, you know, that disconnect is just striking. But of course, you know, Miles is all in. The Australian government is all in. They made that clear in this press conference.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it's important to know too that is a choice that he's making. I mean, I'm not a diplomat, but I would think that there are plenty of ways to be chummy if that's what you want and be in without going that far.
Yeah, and look, I'm sure there would be lots of people in the government who would take it as a win that Hegseth praised Australia for increased defence spending, for Australia's commitment to the Aukus deal. He also, when he was in Singapore, singled out New Zealand as a freeloader because somebody asked him about New Zealand's defence spending.
Listen, I mean, if I'm being honest, 2% is not enough, and so 2% is freeloading. But I don't have anything against New Zealand. But I think, as my friends Richard Marles and John Healy know, I'm probably the most blunt with our closest friends about what our capabilities are and where they need to be to ensure that we're locking arms and shields considering the threats of the world. And we can't just say, oh, we've been friends for a long time, so let's work together. It's we've been friends for a long time, so you better have the same capabilities we do, because if we don't, our alliance is meaningless.
And so I imagine there's a sense of relief among parts of the Australian government that Australia is kind of avoiding that. And, you know, we've talked lots about the difficulty of grappling with Trump and not like deliberately provoking him. But I think you're absolutely right that there are ways to do that without being quite so chummy. You know, like, you don't need to use the term war fighters. And I think that is a choice. It's a clear signal to Hegseth, who was standing next to him, about alignment and support that I don't think was necessary to avoid the wrath of Trump. You know, you talk about soldiers, talk about sailors, whatever. Like, I think you're right. I think that was a choice.
Yeah. And I mean, I think the thing that is disturbing to me about it is I remember when Mark Carney, Canadian Prime Minister, made his big speech at Davos about the rupture going on in global politics. And shortly after, he went to China and got questioned about it, criticized for going to China, an authoritarian country, after, you know, claiming to stand up for, you know, values. His response really kind of stayed with me. He said, we have some really clear guardrails in our relationship with China. And the implication was it's not an everything relationship, right? Like, you know, there are some clear differences between our two countries and, you know, we're standing firm on them. But we can, you know, negotiate over trade or, you know, whatever in a limited sense. The thing that's worrying about that use of language for me from Miles is that and this is, backed up by all the evidence of all our history with the United States since, World War II, that there are no guardrails there. And it doesn't matter what the Trump administration does. The worst that's going to happen is a mumbled criticism or, not even that.
And I mean, Miles sort of attempted that in a pretty ham-fisted way in his speech, where he echoed Carney's comments about, the international rules-based order has always been imperfect and unevenly applied, but the United States has seen it in its own self-interest to uphold that order. And there is a universe where you see that as a veiled criticism of what the Trump administration is doing. But then when you're standing next to Hegseth and saying he's your good friend and talking about warfighters, you're just undercutting your own message. And again, to go back to our earlier conversation, like no one believes that. And I think especially, thinking about it more, the visual symbolism of it all is really striking, right? So they're in Singapore, right, talking about the Indo-Pacific, talking about Southeast Asia, and it's an AUKUS conference of 3 white blokes. And particularly in the context of Hegseth and what the Trump administration is doing, that's really something. But and we've said this before, that's what AUKUS is. Like when AUKUS was announced, it was described as the revival of the Anglosphere. And
by some people, that was a great thing.
Yeah.
And I mean, if you thought some of the language was unsettling, I challenge listeners to look up images of the conference and look at Pete Hegseth's pocket square, US flag pocket square. That was an abomination.
Yeah, the not to be too shallow about it, but the clothing choices and the aesthetic choices of Trump men is something pretty upsetting.
Really sends a signal, doesn't it? And just before we finish up, it was interesting that the UK Secretary of Defence talked about AUKUS being the most significant military partnership since NATO, given, what's going on to the NATO alliance at the moment. Doesn't bode well, look forward to Donald Trump needing Tasmania at some point. All right, Emma. Well, I think that's probably all we've got time for this week. But I know you'll be looking forward to the UFC fight in the South Lawn in a little under 2 weeks. You got your pay-per-view ready. I'm confident. Isn't the South Lawn looking good?
Far out. It is, as we've said many times, sometimes the symbolism is just too much. Yeah. We don't need metaphors. We don't need to be beaten over the head with the metaphors.
It's too easy. Yeah. All right, Emma. We'll talk to you again next week. Thanks very much.
Thanks so much, Angus.
Thanks so much for joining us. If you'd like to get in contact, you can reach us at podcasts@australiainstitute.org.au. And you can support the research that powerful interests fear. You can make a tax-deductible donation to the Australia Institute's end of financial year appeal before 30th of June. You can give now at australiainstitute.org.au or via the link in the show notes. This episode was recorded on Monday the 1st of June. After America is supported by the Andrew Farron Foundation, and we'll be back next week. I'm Angus Blackman. Thanks for listening.